Hello, my name is Conrad Fimbris. Today I'm going to be speaking to you about my game industry white paper, Narrative Innovation, Visual Novels Existing in Limbo Between Books and Video Games. First, I would like to explain what is a visual novel. Visual novels are becoming an increasingly common terminology to gamers. What exactly visual novels are, though, seems to be a bit harder to describe. Uchikoshi, a visual novel director, states that they are video games with an emphasis on narrative. Then we get this graph. I think visual novels may need to just be defined as visual novels. They do not seem to fit within the expectations of either a book or video games. Or a video game. I attempted to narrow this down while asking both developers of visual novels and people who play them. This led to inconclusive results, which you can see here, seeming to split down the middle for the players. Developers pointed them closer to video games, but this appeared to be because they are software and therefore have all the capabilities of a video game. Some developers also took time in this section to liken visual novels most closely to theater instead. Visual novels provide such a wide host of experiences that each one could separately be considered to be either a book or a video game. For example, though it could still be considered a visual novel, Ace Attorney, the most well-known visual novel series, has many elements of video games through its court case-inspired puzzles that require solving to progress through the story. So over here on the right, you can see the evidence that you can present within the court case, and then that would allow you to get further into the story, but wouldn't allow you to go forward otherwise. This brings up what limitations either books or video games have that would then stop them from also being considered visual novels. Where is that split defined, even if it is unclear? So what can visual novels do that books cannot? Books had comparatively concrete reasons, comparatively to video games, as to why they were not visual novels. Though books can include multimedia experiences with picture books, they are typically more limited in this aspect. Think like soundtracks. Visual novels also gain the advantage of directing the scene somewhat more. They can limit the amount of information divulged to the reader by only displaying what is currently happening within their text boxes. So think that a visual novel's text box is only about 3 or 4 lines long, whereas you would be presented with a whole page by a book. They can also have characters move around on the screen with animations, present more detailed images, and time music and sound effects to the events. Visual novels also have greater potential with accessibility options, some providing multiple fonts and screen readers to assist anyone who would like to enjoy their story, thinking like blind people would be able to enjoy a story sort of like an audiobook, but these are presented within the visual novels settings. One of the developers who I asked also mentioned choices that split into many paths, though brought up choose-your-own-adventure books to counter their own point. Visual novels do make that experience of making a choice a lot more seamless, though, by immediately pushing you into whatever path you chose, rather than flipping through the pages. So my next slide is about what can visual novels do that video games cannot? And my answer is nothing. But I do have an asterisk there. The differences between visual novels and video games seems to be based on the expectations placed upon them. Like I said in that quote earlier from Uchikoshi about a video game, visual novels being video games with an emphasis on narrative, they also have expectations upon them. Visual novels are software, so they theoretically could have any amount of mechanics within them, but they generally are thought to place their narrative before anything else. So even if a visual novel includes elements of other games, like platforming, they still would be expected to be more attentive to their narrative than that element. Visual novels without mechanics also have greater control over their pacing than video games do, as players are guided along a set path without gameplay obstacles intervening with story timing. As stated by Fleming, visual novels offer essentially linear narratives that include opportunities for players to branch the storyline, resulting in a variety of endings. All right, up next I have a bit of a tangent. Uchikoshi, again, the visual novel director, defined visual novels as something where the selection made by the player's decision changes the history of events or outcome that takes place within a given set of rules. Uchikoshi combines this with the statement that visual novels are games. This would imply that a visual novel requires input, but the currently still in development visual novel, Remember the Flowers, and also with this player feedback here, and here's my graphic of Remember the Flowers, do not fit this definition of requiring decisions or being able to input and change parts of the story. So I learned about this thing called a kinetic novel, which are within visual novels. So this is a niche inside of a niche. And they're essentially just visual novels that don't have any decisions within them. I don't know if this is a super, like, this is the popular coined term within the fandom, but it's not necessarily an official term. And I think there's actually a company that made this term, and like as part of their visual novels, like being kinetic novels, so that way they could more properly define what they were. Anyway, so if the expectations for visual novels are different from those of video games, then why are they all served in the same marketplace? Though I believe that visual novels can still be posted to multiple storefronts, I think that additionally providing a specialized one or additional accommodation for visual novels within existing storefronts would be valuable. I also asked in my survey about this idea, though without inserting my own bias. I asked both players and developers, would you like to see a marketplace specifically catered to visual novels? This seemed more favorable toward yes. So with this, I also asked the developers what they would like this marketplace to look like. Up next is my big fancy slide that doesn't necessarily need to be, but I'm calling it the future of visual novels. I asked them what they would like this marketplace to look like, and some actually said that they felt it already existed with popular marketplaces Steam and itch.io. Others felt those provided a baseline, but wanted improved sorting and tagging to find stories that a reader would be searching for. A feature mentioned was the following in subscription functionality of Patreon so that players could make sure to keep up with news and updates. One also saw itch.io's highly customizable pages that encouraged community engagements with comments being right at the top as helpful. Another wanted an estimated length of reading to be an option for writers to include, thinking word count or maybe having multiple people read through and provide their own times, similar to How Long to Beat's web pages. A few did also a few of the developers who answered no also actually explained why they felt they didn't want a marketplace. These responses mentioned the existing marketplaces and that the market for visual novels were considered too small to warrant such a divide. One that I directly quoted was George Squares, who is the writer of The Smoke Room, and he claimed that a standardization of this medium would hurt the diversity of the stories available if it led to increased barriers and gatekeepers. Through this response, I think that a non-exclusive storefront for visual novel fans, though it may not necessarily be the most lucrative, could be a boon to the medium. Allowing the creators of works uploaded to this to deem their work as a visual novel without providing requirements would best leave this open for growth. I also asked visual novel developers about their thoughts on the current landscape of visual novels. My first question was related to updating, which I left somewhat open to interpretation, which many brought up. Updating within visual novels can refer to an episodic or chapter-style release, often brought on by lower-budget productions that require a long time to create their full experience. Employing this can be great for receiving feedback on their story and helps to provide an overtime experience similar to the wait between episodes of a TV show, encouraging discussion between fans. Updating also refers to the ability of visual novels to fix typos or even outright retcon story threads that are not working. Every developer appreciated the ability to do these things, as they felt it over time made for a better experience for the reader. Accessibility was another large focus of these responses. Making sure that the stories that have already been put together can be read by anyone would be a great improvement. A few mentioned that their issue with current visual novels was that of mindset, finding that creating visual novels at times came with the stipulation that some developers were embarrassed to be making them. They wanted people to be able to be prouder of the craft and present it as a professional but different medium. I think this could come in time with a better explanation of what visual novels are, but because they currently exist in this nebulous space, there is some difficulty. There was also a sentiment of making sure that whatever improvement can be made should be done with the story of that specific visual novel being kept in mind. So, whatever improvements you're making, make sure that they work for your own story. I finished my survey with questions about what brought these developers into visual novels and if they would like to continue working on them in the future. The developers had a huge range of answers to the question of what brought them to it. Visual novels had advantages in being easier to develop than video games, focusing on the story rather than the game. They also functioned as a way to create something that had a better chance of being seen than the traditional mediums and required less artwork than something like a comic book. Also, it gave the visual novel creators more ability to elevate beyond a book, some also stating that it seemed less intimidating than creating a book. I assume this is because they would have to deal with publishing companies and making sure that it got in front of people. When asked if they would like to continue with visual novels, their response was nearly unanimous. Do you plan to continue working on visual novels in the future? 95.8% yes. Visual novel creators love their medium and seem to want to stick with it. Many of their responses were from people currently still working on their visual novels, so they wanted to keep with it. Still having more stories wanting to be told was another common thread. A few, and the one who voted no on this poll, clarified to say they were not opposed to working on more visual novels, that they were contractors who had just been involved in projects and would be fine if their work continued to be visual novels. So, in conclusion, visual novels do exist in a hard-to-define limbo, so explaining what your particular visual novel is through advertising is up to the discretion of the creator. They have advantages relative to both books and video games, and are worth considering as an output for telling a story. Visual novels deserve their own marketplace or search engine that would help players find more stories to explore. Visual novels are a medium that visual novel developers find to be advantageous to the work they would like to create. And as a personal aside, I would urge you to give visual novels a try if you have ever put them off for some reason. There really is so much to experience within them. Thank you for watching.